welcome back to our channel. I'm Carla and this is Honey Crumb Cake Studio. We are moving on to part 2 of our Café au Lait Dahlia tutorial. So if you've already been following part 1, you will have gotten to a certain point with your flower where you've built the center and some subsequent rows. This is what it should look like. Your flower should now be dried, as in dried overnight. And we're going to move on with another row of unwired petals. This time we are using a rose petal cutter or any teardrop petal cutter that you have. Mine is about 1.25 inches at its longest point. And I am cutting out 13 of these petals. So lucky number 13, shout out to all my fellow Taylor Swift fans. So 13 petals, and we're gonna use our ball tool here to smooth out the raw cut edge of each petal, and then the Dresden tool, I'm using the wider end of the Dresden tool here, dragged down either side of the petal. And then I'm using the sharp, pointy end of the Dresden tool to create some vertical veins on the front side of the petal. I'm using water. You can use edible glue or egg whites as your glue. Glue the petal at the base and then roll it over, so fold the bottom edges over onto themselves to create a kind of little open trumpet shape. And then just set that petal aside onto your workbench to set a little bit while you work on the other petals. So again, use your ball tool. I'm working on 2 petals now at a time for efficiency. Smooth out the edges and elongate the petal using your ball tool. Then use the blunt end of your Dresden tool, dragged down either side of the pointy end of the petal. Then flip the petal over onto its front and use the sharp end, so the very pointy end of your Dresden tool, as a veining stick, and just drag some vertical veins into the petal. You can pinch the tip to give it a little more definition. Add your glue or water to the base. Fold over those bottom edges. I'm going to glue 7 of them at once. So just add a little bit of water or edible glue to the base of each petal. Grab your fully dried flower center and start adding petals. You can be quite random with this in that you are just picking petals, sticking them into place as they fit. So take a look at your flower every so often from the front and just make sure that the petals that you're adding are all reasonably lined up with each other so they're on the same plane. And then bend a hook in the wire and hang your flower upside down while you work on and glue the next 6. So we've just added 7, here are the next 6, and now I'm just sticking them on where they fit. Constantly check your flower to make sure that everything is looking pretty good. Café au Lait dahlias are never perfectly symmetrical, they're not like pom-pom dahlias. So you want to create some natural variation, and a little bit of asymmetry is okay. Again, keep the hook in your wire and hang your flower upside down. Now we're going to move on to the wired petals. So we're going to stick to the same size teardrop cutter as before, except now we're going to roll the paste a little more thickly. So this would be a 4 if you're using a pasta attachment. And that same rose petal cutter or teardrop cutter, which is 1.25 inches long, is now going to be used for the wired petals. So I'm using 26 gauge floral wire here. I'm threading my wire through the petal, through the rounded end of that teardrop shape, just until it's about, let's say, 3/4 of an inch in. And then you want to elongate the petal really well with your ball tool. So really thin it out on the pointy end. We're going to treat the petal the same way as we did with the unwired petals, so Dresden tool on either side, except now when you draw veins down the front of your petal with your sharp end of the Dresden tool, you just want to be careful not to cut into where the wire has been inserted. So just beware as you draw veins down the center. The same as before, you're going to make a little trumpet, except now you're going to grab the wire and the base of the petal and just bend the wire a little bit to create a C shape there. That will be very important later when we're assembling the flower, and I'll talk you through that again in a little bit, but for now We're moving on to a dahlia petal cutter. This is also considered a succulent petal cutter, so you may already have a petal of this shape in your collection. I am now using 24 gauge wire because these petals are going to be bigger. And I'm going to, again, dip my wire into water or edible glue, wipe off the excess on my hand, and then thread the wire through. Use my ball tool to elongate and extend the pointy end of that petal really well. The petal ends up getting pretty thin during this process, which is great because that's going to add to the delicate, translucent quality of the flower later on once everything has been assembled. Again, the blunt end of the Dresden tool is dragged down either side. The petal is flipped over, and then the sharp end of the Dresden tool is what I'm using as my veining stick, just avoiding that very central area where the wire is. Adding a little bit of water along the base on either side, folding the petal over into a little trumpet, using my Dresden tool to make sure that I still have a little air gap there. And then very importantly, I'm making sure the petal is attached at the base, and I'm gently bending the wire to create a C curve just at the base. So as you'll see here, once they've all dried, they all have that C curve just at the base, which is going to create just enough of a gap so that all of the petals fit together around the shape of the center that we've already built. In preparation for assembly, you'll see there that I've bent all of my wires down 90 degrees. My outer row that we added previously is now dry. I'm adding some floral tape, and I'm going to add my wired petals. So the smaller size that we made with the rose petal cutter or the teardrop cutter, those are the first ones to go on. And I'm adding them as they fit. So this is, again, as it was with our sugar rose tutorial, it's a bit of a game of Tetris to see which pieces fit, and sometimes you have to thread them in between each other. So just pick up petals as you go, see where they fit, wrap the tape around to secure them into place, and then once you've added a few, say 3 or 4, just tape down the wire to lock those into place, and then carry on adding subsequent petals. I usually like to tape all the way down the central stem once I've added every 3 or 4 petals so that they don't start shifting around on me later on. Once you get to the last few petals of this row, you may find that you don't use all of the petals that you made. I happen to use all of the petals that I made because they fit onto my particular flower, but every flower is different. So if you end up with 1 or 2 spares, that's totally fine. You don't have to cram them all in if they don't naturally fit. At this point, you could stop right there. You don't have to add any more petals. That's already a really good sized dahlia. But of course we made all of those extra big petals. So we're gonna take this flower to the next level and turn it into a true dinner plate dahlia. Café au lait dahlias are also known as dinner plate dahlias because they sometimes grow big enough that they literally are the diameter of a dinner plate. So we're going to carry on adding all the petals that we made, or at least all the petals that will fit. This final part of adding your subsequent layers of very long petals is a bit delicate. I tend to take my time with this. I pick up a petal, I try it, I test it to see where it will fit. Sometimes I put it back down, I pick up another petal. I usually have some lovely music playing while I'm doing this. I try to take deep breaths because it's quite easy to break things in this final stage as you're trying to slot everything together. So I would suggest just being very patient with yourself and patient with the flower and patient with the process. And try out the petals, test them out, see where they'll go. Tape down the stem every 3 or 4 petals once you are satisfied with their position. And put the flower down if you need a break and you want to go take a drink of water. Take a deep breath and then come back to it and continue with your final assembly. I am adding another layer of floral tape all the way down the stem here just to lock in my petals because I've finally put all my petals in place and I'm happy with where they are. So I'm going to commit to that. And here we have it, the completely assembled Café au lait dahlia. I'm not going to say that it's finished yet because it will only be finished once we've added petal dust for some extra coloring and some extra dimension, which we will do in part 3. So let's move on and just make some dahlia leaves as the final finishing touch of part 2. And the dahlia leaves, I'm using green gum paste for these, and the most wonderful dahlia leaf veiner and cutter set from the Sugar Art Studio. I will put links to all of these materials and tools in the description box below. I'm using a cell board for this because it naturally creates nice deep grooves for my wire. You don't have to use a cell board, it just makes things a bit easier. I'm going to cut out my leaves. I'm using the smaller size of the dahlia leaf cutter set here just for demo, and I'm going to cut 2 of these and work on them both at the same time for efficiency. If you work a little more slowly, I would suggest working on just one at a time and keeping the other one in a Ziploc bag or under a Stay Fresh mat so it doesn't dry out too quickly. Use a ball tool to thin out and elongate your leaf. Do the same on both. And then grab that amazing dahlia leaf veiner and give your leaf a super, super good press to make sure that all of the texture gets transferred to your leaf. How amazing is that? Super beautiful. Love this veiner. Give your leaf a pinch all the way down the central vein and then put it on some bumpy foam to dry with a natural curve. Do the same with all of your leaves. Give them a good pinch all the way down the center, and then put them on some bumpy foam to dry. You can make as many of those as you want for your project, and then in part 3 I'll show you how to add color to them with edible paint. I will also show you how to add all of the beautiful petal dust and dimension here that you see in the photo, and also how to assemble the leaves into stems. So we look forward to seeing you for part 3. Stay tuned. Part 3 is coming soon. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, click here to see it. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and leave us a comment below to let us know how your dahlias are going, or ask a question, or give us some feedback. And thanks again. We'll see you soon. Cheers.